Hi everyone, Sliced Lime here. Today I'd like to introduce you to a system I've been working on for several years now in different shapes. I'm calling it the Lime Porter system. This is an expandable system for multiplayer servers using Enderpearl stasis to provide transportation across a server. It is made to be possible to add both new players and new stations to existing systems, so you don't need to plan out your entire transportation network in advance. We're here in the prototype build for the system on my fan server. Let me show you how to operate it before we get into the redstone labyrinth behind this thing. This here is the departure hall. On the left side you can see the destination selector. This system currently has 3 stations, so we have 2 other destinations to pick from. You select your destination by interacting with the note block. Let's say I want to travel to the spawn station. This light at the end lights up to indicate that I've selected a destination. If I click the wrong thing, I can now reselect and it'll replace my choice. Now on the other side is the operator selection. The system needs to know who to teleport, so every user has their own panel in each station. I'll do the same here to indicate that I am the one who wants to teleport. Since I've now selected both a user and a destination, the system kicks into action. On the back end, what happens now is that a ticket is being sent through a piston bolt in the nether, automatically being navigated to my destination, where it is decoded and triggers a stasis chamber that has my enderpearl sitting in it. And here we are in the spawn station arrival hall. Every user of the system has one of these stasis pods, and I'm automatically given an enderpearl on landing here, so I can reset my chamber for the next journey. To do that, I aim straight up and toss the pearl. We can see that the system kicked into action. In addition to being a coded destination for the teleportation system, the system also has a manual call button for each player, so if someone is lost or in trouble, you can come to their rescue by pressing the button above their stasis pod. The exit is this bubble column here, which takes us back up to the departure hall. This system works on versions after 1.16.2. It relies on items transporting through nether portals, which means portal delay is never an issue. It also uses nether-initiated chunk loaders to load chunks on demand, so it doesn't require permanent chunk loading, which makes it very lag-friendly even for larger networks. Some limitations of the system. Because it is based on the nether and the switches for this thing are fairly large, there's a limit to how close you can put your stations. It could certainly be possible to make smaller switches to enable that, but it would come at the cost of speed. I don't know of a way to do that without taking the cart out of the piston bolt and onto regular rails. You could also build this whole thing in a much smaller way with regular rails instead of a piston bolt, but the system will be much slower. It is also possible that with the new minecart experiments from 1.21.2, you could make a much smaller version of these switches while maintaining the speed. I haven't tinkered with that at all. And speaking of the new development, this will work just fine with the changes to enderpearls. So, what if you want to build the system for yourself? Well, first of all, I'll leave some schematics downloads in the description. The piston bolt work is all standing on the shoulders of Giant here, with especially the work of Inspector Telland and Kaizen for the Demibolt network. The pathways are pretty much exactly Kaizen's design without the signal transmission in that network, and the switches are a modified version of their switches to use the ticket items for routing. So if you want to learn to make those, or to adapt some other things like diagonal paths, my suggestion is to check out their videos and world downloads for all the original variants. I don't believe you'll be able to build this system by just doing a block-by-block placement for everything, so rather than make a block-by-block tutorial, I'll try to explain how everything works so you can make your own adaptations and debug the system if something goes wrong. Let's start with the overworld part of the station design. The stasis pods are pretty straightforward. One thing to note is that there are only 2 water sources, at the top and the bottom of the water column. This gives us the perfect momentum break for the pearl to detect it properly and lets it settle at the bottom for a quick fall when the system is triggered. The trigger mechanism are a pair of pistons that switch a soul sand block for an open iron trapdoor, which lets the enderpearl fall through. One thing that complicates this design a bit is that it's all pretty compact, so the floor of the departure hall and the ceiling of the arrival hall are basically part of the mechanism in some places. So for instance, the buttons for calling players power the block under the piston, and the ceiling block next to it has a repeater on top of it, so your ability to decorate the space here is quite limited, which is why the floor is lowered to give some more space for players. These item filters are the player ticket filter. The chests are here just as an output. If you run the system for a very long time, eventually you might want to empty these to move the tickets back up to the departure droppers. That's a good segue into filter items. You'll need quite a number of items for this system. There are player tickets and station tickets, as well as 3 types of filler items you'll need many of. I'd suggest using items readily available from farms you already have. It's a perfect application for all the zombie flesh or arrows from mob farms. They can be basically anything as long as it stacks to 64. We use iron nuggets for player tickets and gold nuggets for station tickets, and obviously you'll need an XP source to do mass renaming of them. I do suggest using visually distinct items for player and station tickets for ease of debugging. Stasis pods are on alternating sides, so the second player ends up opposite of the first. You'll probably want to shoot for building a few extra pods if you expect to expand the system. Adding more isn't particularly hard, but you'll need to tear down the back wall to make more space. I've also added this feeding system for ender pearls to the droppers. You could skip this if you don't have an ender or something like it, and just fill the droppers manually when needed, but this is convenient if you have a good farm. These side chambers are used to access the filling mechanism. Pull the lever to lock the hopper and prevent the shulker from being picked up, then switch to a full one. You'll need a good 3-4 shulkers to fill each side of the system to begin with, depending on how many pods you build, of course. Moving up to the departure part of the system, most of the complexity here is that everything is crammed into a small space. There's redstone directly under the floor of the entrance, the drop shafts go straight through some very tight spots in the mechanism, and so on. Player tickets and station tickets are loaded into the droppers behind the note blocks. If you use the system more than 576 times for a certain player or station, you'll need to fill these in, but there would be space for another hopper and storage if you want to provide more upfront instead. If you want to add more than 15 players or stations, you'll need to make sure the redstone signals from the observers are extended so it reaches all the way to the front, otherwise reselecting stations will not work. This redstone system is probably best built block by block off the schematic. It is responsible for checking inputs, lighting up the indicator lights, and triggering everything when both inputs have been selected. The portal is an interesting complexity of its own. Its orientation is going to matter to which direction the items spit out in the nether, which matters for the orientation of the connection to the network. You likely want to start the whole process by making sure you end up with a good portal connection, especially if you're adding the system into a server with pre-existing nether infrastructure. You'll want to make sure that it doesn't interconnect with other portals nearby. If this is not possible, you can move the height of the portal as well to get a closer match. We've done this in one of the stations in our prototype network, but of course this comes with the drawback of taking longer to transport the items up and down. You could also mirror this design if needed, but keep in mind that the station ticket dropper must be the one closer to the portal of the two. A final note on the station design: these barrels below the ice line are the collection points for discarded tickets. That is, if a user selected a station and then changed their mind, the first ticket ends up in here. Let's move to the nether side of the station. Tickets get picked up by hopper carts wedged into the bottom of the portal frame. I initially didn't have these, but found out that the system would occasionally miss picking up items without them, so ended up with this design. To get the carts in, you'll need to use a curved rail next to the block. The redstone around is a timing circuit that waits for 2 items to get picked up, then dispense a hopper cart that picks up the items and sends it down the rail line. You need exactly 21 filler items spread over the last 3 slots in this hopper, and they need to not stack with any of the ticket types. The timing of this rail is done so the hopper cart ends up picking up exactly 1 item out of each of these hoppers. These contain the other 3 filler items I mentioned earlier. This means that when the hopper cart exits the station, it has 5 unique items inside of it, which is important for the system to work. Those hoppers are connected through these storage chests to these item filters, which will take those same filler items out of any incoming carts. These are not overflow protected, since they'll only ever be picking items up one at a time. The final item filter is connected to storage that doesn't go anywhere. This filters out the station tickets for this station. If you use a system heavily, you might want to eventually empty this to distribute tickets back out to other stations. The final piece of the station design is for the incoming carts. Once they reach this point, the only item left is the player ticket, which is grabbed by this hopper and tossed into the portal by this dropper using the small redstone circuit. The cart itself goes on to get dropped into item form by hitting the cactus and gets stored in this long chain of chests. The idea behind the system is that people likely travel to and from a station with roughly the same frequency, so it should remain fairly balanced, but it is of course possible that you'll run out of carts somewhere. This small adapter is what kicks off the piston bolt when the cart is on it. Repeaters here need to be set to 2 ticks, the rest are single tick along the piston bolt. Like I mentioned before, piston bolt construction you'll need to deal with from Kaizen's system. We're using repeaters instead of comparators, and there are slabs on top of everything to prevent spawns. Feel free to skip that if you have a mob switch that's always on, I suppose. Keep in mind that since the tracks are 1 block apart, there's no real way to center them in a chunk, and so you might need to make some blocks of adjustments here and there to keep chunk loaders fed from the right places, align different stations with a bolt, place switches in the right places, and so on. The other modification is that there is a signal split off from the first repeater in each chunk that sends a signal down the line to the next chunk loader in the chain. This ensures that chunks load in time for the cart to be able to enter it. If the chunk loader doesn't trigger early enough, the chunk won't be entity ticking in time for the cart to get pulled by the pistons. The first signal comes directly out of the station's firing mechanism. The rest of them are all connected to repeaters in the piston bolt. Let's look at the chunk loaders then. They're pretty simple. A dispenser dispenses a minecart onto this sloped rail. That immediately transports into the overworld, which loads the overworld chunk. On the overworld side, there's a cactus right next to the portal on the side the cart is traveling towards, which the cart is immediately going to touch, which breaks it into item form. That item doesn't have a portal cooldown, so it goes immediately back to the nether, which loads the 3x3 chunks centered on the portal, so now we have the next chunk ready for the cart. You probably want to make sure that no mobs can wander into these portals, and sending 2 armor stands through on the bottom blocks prevents zombified piglins from spawning in the portal itself. Back on the nether side again, you'll once again want a hopper cart wedged into the bottom of the portal frame on top of a hopper pointed into a dropper facing upwards, which completes the cycle. At the start of this, you'll have 1 minecart in the dropper and 1 in the dispenser, so the dropper one replaces the one that just got dispensed, making the system fully reusable. The final piece we'll need to talk about are the switches. They are massive things here that extend more than 1 chunk out, so you'll need to keep that in mind when planning your stations. 2 switches next to one another will have 1 chunk of bolt in between. Most of this is just Kaizen's design, but the control mechanism is replaced by an item detection design rather than signal strength, so some of the comparators are replaced by repeaters. The routing configuration is controlled by the 2 chests on top of the incoming lane in all directions. The base setup for these chests are 3 full stacks of items and 1 stack of 55. Again, these need to be fillers that don't stack with anything that can be in the cart. By default, the cart will turn right. For each station that is forward when coming from the direction you're facing, add that station's ticket into the first chest. For each ticket you add in, remove 1 of the filler items so the total amount of items remains the same. The same thing goes for the second chest, which has tickets for all the stations that are to the left from this angle. This way, any new stations that get added will need to have their tickets added to all existing switches to make sure the routing is correct. This also means there are no restriction on the topology of the network. It's perfectly fine to have multiple routes between the same stations, you just need to pick whatever route is closest when you set up the chest for the switches. Composters on top of the hoppers in this design are for lag reduction. If you're in a sufficiently new version, it should be fine to replace these with any full block, but then you may also want to cover those with slabs to prevent spawns. I highly suggest having beacons around for jump boost as you build this, since there's a fair bit of going up and down. Building it is pretty complex, but the end result is really cool, so if you want to build it, go for it, and come join my Discord if you want to discuss it or have any questions. The material spent is quite high on this though, so I wouldn't recommend doing this before you have quite some farms established for things like iron and redstone as well as random filler items. Anyway, that's it for this one. If there's some part of the system you feel like I didn't cover, feel free to let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to follow up. My name is Sly Slime, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.